Hi, everybody. My name is Zeb Wellborn, president of the Chino Valley Chamber of Commerce. Today, I'm here with Kelly Hall from the Longview Chamber of Commerce. Kelly, give me a little introduction. How long have you been at your chamber? And yeah, tell me about your past chamber experience.
Sure. So this is Longview, Texas, just to make sure everybody knows. This is Texas. A little bit of ways from where you are, but it's all good. We have a lot in common. So I have been at this chamber for nearly 18 years. I've been in the industry 36 years, was in Greenville, Texas prior to that, and was started in Oklahoma. So my path brought me to Texas. It's been a good ride and a great profession because I still get, is that your real job? And I'm thinking, yes, it is. And I love it.
And that's awesome. So talk to me. So today I want to interview you about setting up a 501c3. And I ran the session at our WACE conference. And when I asked everybody, like, who should I bring as a panelist? And you were like at the top of the list from everybody. So they said, you got to interview Kelly. So we had you on the panel. That was a few months ago. But now I kind of want to pick your brain from a selfish reason because I'm trying to start a 501c3 and we haven't started the process yet. And I want to pick your brain on how best to do that and hopefully share that with others too. So let's talk about, did you set up the 501c3 foundation at your chamber?
Yes, this is the second one I've set up at a chamber. And, I think we talked a little bit about this in California when I was there. I think the best place to start is ask why. Why do you want a chamber foundation? What are you not accomplishing within your 501c6 structure that says, oh, I need to have a 501c3? Answering that question as to why do you need it? Why does your community need it? But more importantly, why do your customers need it? Because as a chamber of commerce, we don't service the community. They're an added value benefit to employers. We service our customers. Those are the people who invest in us year after year after year. I heard this phrase yesterday. Too often we build sidewalks and tell people where to walk. We don't follow the path that people are walking and build the sidewalks to accommodate the needs. And I love that analogy because when I'm thinking about a foundation, how true is that? Are we doing this because it's the popular thing to do? I mean, our peers are doing it across the country. Or is it going to be a tool in our tool chest that allows us to act with intentionality to have a greater impact on our customers and the community we serve at large?
Yeah, so that's great. So let's go back to your why. So you said you set up two foundations. Walk me through your why of setting up those foundations.
Well, the first one was greed. And I mean that with humility. What I was learning was utility companies, national banks, not community banks, but national banks, other entities were changing the way they fund bodies of work. And the way it was teed up to me is, Kelly, we have an above the line spending. That's a traditional business expense. 501c6, you're teed up perfectly, but you're leaving money on the table every year with our company because we have below the line expenditures. Those expenditures align with our corporate values. Our corporate values oftentimes drives the values of a community and the programming that we do to act with intentionality. And we were leaving those dollars behind. So that was the core as to the why we set up our foundation. In Longview, that was true here as well. Yet there was something else brewing under the radar. And that is, as the backbone organization to drive vision for a community, to ensure that we create an economic environment that's sustainable to create jobs, retain jobs, and attract the talent that's needed, we had to change our business model. So what that meant for us is, who's doing that bold, intentional work that's outside the normal day-to-day operations of an economic development organization like a Chamber of Commerce? And that's when our board said, if we want to do an amphitheater, if we want to build an advanced manufacturing academy, if we want to, whatever the dream is, that's going to help attract and retain talent, we needed to have an organization in place that would allow that to happen.
Mhm.
And a foundation was the tool that we believed was the best route for us to go.
Okay, so let me walk you through a little bit of those discussions, I guess, because personally, I haven't had those discussions. I mean, a little bit, but it's not like the above the line, below the line thing. There's been a couple of references where like, oh, you're a 501c6, so I can't, or at least we don't have the funds to give you that. Maybe if you were a 501c3, we would. But walk me through a little bit about how those discussions were generated so that you're like, for sure, I have to do this.
Okay, so 2 utility companies that service our area. Especially with the lobby work that's happening and some of the national discussions, this has proven to be even more true today than it was perhaps 10 years ago. So utility company, you know, we are all in for workforce development. We're into making sure we develop partnerships with schools, with higher ed. We want to help shape policy, but we have to be very careful with how we do that so we don't lose whatever it is that they are at risk of losing or being sued, however that looks. And so we identify specific initiatives, whether that's talent, whether that's workforce development, and then we have, you know, we set it up to where we run those dollars through our foundation. And the foundation contracts with the chamber to execute on specific initiatives. So that company is not looking for logo placement. This is not about sponsorship. This is about investing in transformational work that aligns with the corporate values of a company. So it's a different way of thinking.
So
Oftentimes we think in terms of sponsorships or advertising, whatever those terms are. This is more about a partnership to transform a body of work that's going to help us have the impact that we need on creating talent, skilled workforce, whatever that looks like on that initiative.
yeah, so how do you get involved in those conversations? Because you mentioned the amphitheater, you mentioned bringing advanced manufacturing in your community, and these are things that I'm like starting to explore. But how do you put yourself in that position to be that resource where they're coming to you saying, "Hey, we need to do these big initiatives," and you're the one that's going to be putting the foundation together to make this happen?
It's relationship building. I mean, my staff laughs. Where's Kelly today? Because if I'm sitting behind a desk, I'm doing in the weeds work oftentimes. But when I'm out and I'm taking people to lunch, I'm going to their place of business, I'm meeting their teams, I'm asking questions. So for example, we have a large chemical company, pipeline chemical company in town. I try to get with those direct reports under the plant manager as a team at least once a year. And I just go in with, hey, tell me what's going on. What are you able to hire in your departments? What are you seeing? Why not? Is that visa related? Is that skill related? What are those areas? And I just sit back and listen and take notes. Then those plant managers are on our boards. Those key people, C-suite people, is who's on our board. And they'll come in and say, hey, Kelly, we had this discussion. Has the chamber ever thought about XYZ? Mm-hmm. Those conversations don't just happen. The bottom line is they're staged. The bottom line is I come in with prepared questions to seek certain types of information to make sure we're listening to our customers. It's not the Kelly show. It's not the Longview Chamber show. The chamber is the investors of the organization. That's who the chamber is. We're not a building, where our members are, and where they are, that's where how we frame things. And we keep master dream lists to make sure we are looking at, okay, I've heard this about 20 times now. I need to get these people in a room together and let's have an intentional conversation about, is this a pipe dream, or is this something that your company's willing to get behind with 100,000, 200,000? What is that? What does that look like for your company to make this a reality? So let's take the amphitheater. It hasn't happened yet. We have 80 acres in escrow. I will spend literally months bringing in people from the outside who are helping us have conversations. Where are we? Where are we not? What are those challenges? How's it going to be funded? Is this a 3P project, or just, how's this going to look? Who really is going to own it? So that time takes, and that takes time. We've been working on this for 7 years. It may take 3 or 4 more. It may not even happen. But who is that backbone organization that wakes up and says, what's our community going to look like in 50 years, and how do these conversations take place? That's me and you and our key influencers on our board.
Yeah, and I think from just like maybe from a few years ago perspective, like I'm starting to develop that appreciation that there is impact that I can make in that realm. But I think a couple of years ago, I did not feel the same way, or it didn't even cross my mind, how you could put together these big initiatives and pursue big programs like what you're articulating. So how does that get formulated for you? How do you go and ask those questions? How do you develop those relationships to get to a point where you can start actually doing that?
Pick up the phone, email, hey, let's go have lunch. I want to get to know you better. I mean, I have board members. I'm like, but Kelly, we haven't been to lunch in about 3 months. These are board members who served 3 and 4 years ago, because we invest in relationships. When you have a relationship, people are willing, they feel safe, and they're going to trust you with their dreams. When you are a trusted person as a dream keeper, then as strategists, we use our gifts and our skills to bring it together. So board members may not understand that at the beginning. I mean, it's a heart shift and a mind shift in the way the culture of an organization operates. So Kelly Hall arrives in Longview 18 years ago. I can't just go out and start a foundation. It takes 10 years to develop the relationships and understand the needs and the wants of the thought leaders of our community, and then pull them together and keep building those experiences together so they see they can be successful together, and then set that vision together. And honestly, that's why we do our intercity trips all over the country. We're taking thought leaders to a place they choose. Now they choose. When we started, it was a Kelly choice. Now they choose where they want to go learn and dream from. And then they become that true catalytic leader that says, we need an amphitheater. When we go to Billings next month, we're going to see a project that's in about the same place we are, and they're dealing with some of the same challenges we are. But we have 4 city council people and a county commissioner going with us to be that thought leader of, is this right for us? How do we overcome these challenges? And when we need money, the foundation is just a piece in the toolbox. That's just a tool that we use. But really, it's about bringing those thought leaders together and building those relationships and building that momentum and keeping them focused, because they have full-time jobs every day. We do too. And ours is to rein them in.
Yeah, so I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but you just mentioned something that I'd be curious to learn about. So that intercity trips you're talking about. So it sounds like you arrange a trip to go to somebody who is like a community that's doing good things that you kind of hoping that would inspire your community to do the same. What are some of those? One, is that accurate? And then two, what are some of those places you've been that were really eye-opening for you or for your folks?
So the first place we went was Chattanooga, Tennessee. And they started doing inner city trips after Walter Cronkite called them out on the national news as one of the dirtiest places to live in the country. And they said, we're not going to take this anymore. Remember the I'm mad too, Eddie, from the 70s? Oh, you're too young. So in the 70s, that was a big phrase. I'm mad too, Eddie. Well, they said, we're not going to sit back and take this. We're going to truly expose the yuck in our community, and we're going to face it head on, and we're going to come up with solutions on how we're going to face it. And then now you fast forward 60 years, because that was in the 60s.
Okay.
They still go on inner city trips every year because they've learned together we're stronger, but we have to be willing to really look at ourselves and say what we're not good at and where do we need to improve. Yes, build on our strengths, focus on those strengths, but blend those together so you're moving your community forward. We've been to Greenville, South Carolina twice. They've got a 40-year overnight story that their mayor has been engaged in the whole time. You can buy a book about their 40-year overnight success, and they have a beautiful story to tell. We've been to Tulsa, we've been to Little Rock, we've been to Evansville, Indiana. We went to Charlotte, North Carolina. Now we're headed up to Billings. We've been doing this since 2011. And people want to understand, where are these ideas coming from? Because the chamber doesn't do the work. The chamber is the backbone organization that brings the thought leaders together to make a difference, to act for impact. And so while we may be at the table with these discussions, like the amphitheater birthed through us, we're at the table. But there are other great projects that have happened over the last 15 years. We've only been the group that inspired the action. We've not been the doer of the work.
Interesting. Yeah, and then just from I always have, my question always reverts back to like, how do you, and I'll say fund it, but like, how do you get the resources together to actually do that stuff? Because I know like planning that trip is, I'm sure, takes a ton of time, and you need to have somebody putting that together. So how do you fund those inner city trips?
Businesses underwrite it. And when we started, it was it was bare bones. Everybody paid their own way. And a couple of businesses gave us extra for buses and little meals, or they buy the meals while we're there. And so it was a real grassroots, bare bones, get it started. And a development planner out of Chattanooga, it was not the Chattanooga Chamber that helped us. It was pre-Christie, who's now in Oklahoma City, but they were in between CEOs, and we went outside the chamber. We went to make that, and it was a regional planning department that helped us build the agenda because they know their story.
Yeah.
So today we have businesses who come to us and say, we want to be a sponsor. We're going to Charlotte. My company's based in Charlotte. I want to make sure my name is seen as a player in the Charlotte market. So, now businesses come and say, how can we help make this better? Who do we need to make sure is on the bus, literally, with us when we're touring and learning and asking questions? And it took a few years to get that momentum built. But
Yeah,
dreams take time.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so let's go back to the nonprofit work. So,
Sure.
so the why, I feel like we've covered the why. You're doing some phenomenal stuff with it, and what I appreciate is that you've articulated all of this is relationship building. Is all of it that takes time. It's not something you could probably start like just jump in like your first day on the job and start making this stuff happen. So that's super helpful. But let's talk about like the actual because what I've seen from the foundations and even on our panel is there's a totally different scale of the type of work that you're doing with your nonprofit foundation. So it sounds like you're doing like what I'll call high level, big project initiative programs. And then you have other ones which are much more smaller scope and scale. So give a little guidance on like how to make a 501c3 successful.
Well, it's going to take money. So the big question to your investors is, where do they want to invest their time? Do they want to do parties, pageants, and parades to raise money? Or do they want to write significant checks to do significant work? Now, I'm not going to tell you the party gala angle doesn't work. It can serve a purpose for any size community. We don't have the capacity to add those types of events to our plate. Those are time eaters. I'd much rather invest my time in building relationships. And if you want to serve on the board, you just write a $10,000 check. It's real easy. Then we're going to invest those dollars back into the community. So that's an easy ask for me. Our board members, when we did the academy, we had founding fathers of the academy. I didn't raise a penny for the academy. They went out and raised, 25,000 a pop, 50,000 a pop, 100 grand a pop, 200 grand a pop. Kelly Hall is building relationships and connecting dots, but they have a different level of relationship. They're running at a whole different level than Kelly Hall. And so they're able to secure those dollars that make things happen. Now I can invest a year and 5 staff people's time to put on an event to raise 100 grand. Or I can activate one person to go make one phone call and show the marketing materials and bring back a check. To me, where are you going to invest your time?
Yeah. So I understand that. For me, just and probably for a lot of other chamber folks, that seems I don't know if inaccessible is the right word, but it seems like a big how do you identify those folks that are going to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to write you a $50,000 check, or yeah, I'm going to.
I don't identify them by putting the right people on the bus, which is your foundation board. If they don't have access to those relationships, you don't have the right people on the bus, in my opinion. If you have party planners on your board, then that's what kind of organization you're going to have. And I learned that from a little town in Oklahoma called Seminole. Never lived there, knew people who did. And there was a chamber exec in this little town of Seminole, Oklahoma, who did a homecoming event. I said, why are you doing a homecoming event as the chamber? He said, well, we do homecoming every fall. He took the time and investigated. Now, think about this. This was in the late 80s, so no internet. He literally went and used the microfiche at the library to figure out who had graduated from Seminole High School, who was the key people that have become successes that do not live in Seminole, Oklahoma, reached out to them, and he put together his own homecoming event with the C-suites of Fortune 100s, Fortune 500s executives that was from little old Seminole, Oklahoma, less than 10,000 people, and said, we want to pay your way to come home for this event. He raised the money to bring those people home, gave them a tour of the community of how sad it looked. He showed them every ugly spot in that town. And then he said, do you still have family that live here? And they all pretty much said yes. Is this the legacy you want to leave behind for generations to come? And they all wrote him checks. They reimbursed 100% of the travel cost, and he started receiving checks. Now that took vision, that took courage, that made an impression on a Kelly Hall 35 years ago that I still want to emulate today, that type of character who's willing to do the hard work and take the time to do the research, to build the relationships, to have that type of impact on the community I serve. So I don't care what size town you're from or what part of the country you're from, we all have these success stories. Some live in our town, some move back to our town, some don't live here anymore, but people know people. And it's building those relationships to know how to connect all these dots.
Oh, that's great. That's great advice. Great advice. So you mentioned the parties and pageants and the 3 Ps, I guess you'd say. What are some of those things that like, do you do any of that?
We do not do any parades. We reorganized our organization back in 2008, and we used to do a Christmas parade when I came. We reorganized and moved that under the downtown area of the organization because eventually we knew there was either an opportunity or a risk of spinning that off, and I wanted that parade to go with that organization. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what happened. Same thing, there was a downtown festival, ate up tons of our time. Great event, wonderful for quality of life, but was it the best use of our time and resources if you back out all of the staff time that it takes to do that? Move that with the downtown organization. So we didn't do these things overnight. We just gradually spun off the areas that we felt were distractors to performing our body of work to be that backbone organization to act for impact. And our tagline is leading people, leading prosperity. So we're always balancing, okay, there's 100 million great ideas, but are we the right organization to lead that work? Or do we just need to have a seat at the table to be part of the conversation? And I see chambers just try to take on things that are outside of our wheelhouse, and then that distracts them from doing things that are going to have generational impact.
Yeah, so that brings up a good point. How do you identify? So I mean, like, how do you identify what those things are that provide generational impact? Like, how do you make that decision on, like, this is where we need to go? So like amphitheater versus the advanced manufacturing program versus the other stuff that you do, how do you make that decision?
Our investors make that decision for us. So right now we're planning for we're finishing up our plans for 2024. We have a 5-year strategic plan. And then we go and we visit Kelly Hall, takes the top 10 to 15% of our investors. Dave takes the next. We have volunteers, but we go sit down and we say, okay, we can only be good at so many things. Where do you want your dollars invested? And our strategic plan for the foundation and for the chamber is heart, health, education, advocacy, redevelopment, and talent. And I say, okay, of those 5 pillars, where do you want your dollars invested? Well, we really like education, workforce, and talent. Well, let me build something for you. Are you thinking 25 grand? Are you thinking 15 grand? This is above membership. Where do you want those? Well, I need to throw in a couple of golf tournaments, or I need to make sure we're at the luncheons, but I want the rest to go towards talent. Okay. Put a contract together. They sign it. We know what each other wants out of the relationship. Boom. Now there's that strategy. And then there's the strategy I discussed before where the board members are having conversations with people I don't know, and they're raising not 25 grand, but they're raising 25 and up grand to go towards the foundation work.
Yeah.
So again, it's knowing, where does Kelly fit in the wheelhouse? Where does my team fit in the wheelhouse to raise up the leaders where we encourage them to go make those big asks. And then how do we run the chamber? How do we run the foundation? Because they're two different companies, and just making sure everything, the vertical and horizontal lines are all working together. And that's what I do behind the scenes, because I'm a strategist. I prefer that type of work than anything, and I prefer the one-on-one relationships to make sure the strategy fits the needs of our companies. That's where property taxes come from. That's where jobs comes from. They're my priority, and I need to make sure my character, my skill sets are seen as one of, I'm going to take Kelly's call. Now how many gatekeepers do I have to go through? Very few. I'm texting who I need to talk to. Hey, can I have 5 minutes? Tell me when's a good time. And I respect that time. Or can we go to lunch? Need to have a little bit deeper conversation. Hey, I want to meet with your direct reports. Who do you want me to work with to get this set up? And I don't pass that off to anybody. I do that myself. And they respect that.
Yeah. All right. So my question is we have, there's a gap where we have really, what I'll say, committed, like you say, board members, right? But so yours, in your mind, they're writing you a $10,000 check. That's how they get on the board. And my assumption is they're not engaged in chamber stuff. They're writing the check, but the engagement is like, here's the ideas, here's the things that I want to help, that I want to see happen in our community. And Kelly, you're the one that's going to make it happen. And then there's
no. Oh, sorry. No, I don't want to leave that impression. So the foundation board members, this is not chamber, but the foundation board members, Kelly is serving as their executive assistant. I'm coordinating, they're helping them coordinate to be successful. It's not about Kelly making anything happen. They make everything happen themselves. Kelly does not drive that ship. Kelly drives the chamber ship with the board and the key influencers. The foundation board operates totally different. It's a different level of thinking and thought leadership. And they're so entrepreneurial, they're not going to wait on me. They're going to go make it happen, and they're going to come back. And then I'm thinking, how do I make sure everything's legal? That's my, so foundation, I build relationships to make sure we have the right people on that bus. Then they tell us what they're going to do. They drive that body of work, and we just have to sit back and be patient and make sure everything is legal and that we're doing all the things to make them successful. So the chamber, I will say, we bring people together. We're dreaming. It's Kelly and the team, or the executives. We're activating these strategies with the right people. We're leading that. The foundation, the board leads it, not the staff.
Okay, so let me so since I haven't started a foundation, I probably haven't had the ability to put those people in the same room together to operate that way. But I'm thinking of just like how we've been pushing forward on those like large initiatives, right? I mentioned I just kind of came to the realization that we have the ability to do that type of work. So what we've done is like we got our board together and just say, brainstorm, big picture. What do we want to see in our community in the next 5-10 years or whatever? So we did have that discussion, and there were some fruitful things that came out of that. I've had side discussions, like those one-on-one discussions where people will bring up something, just like an off-the-cuff comment, but I'll pick up on it and kind of jot it down as like, here are some things that I know that they've expressed interest in pursuing. And so I've got a list of about 9 things, or like big picture kind of stuff. But I'm kind of having a tough time identifying how to, because like you mentioned, they're guiding the ship and running it. So like, I'm just saying, like, here's some ideas that other people have shared with me that they kind of want to see in our community. Like, what do you think about this? And that's how I'm starting those conversations. I guess my question is, am I doing that the right way? Am I thinking about that the right way?
Oh, I think you are. And I think then it's going to change tomorrow. So, just be flexible. Ask your board, hey, here's 9 ideas. If I were sitting in your shoes,
Yeah.
I'd throw it all 9 out there. We can't do this. What's the top 2 things you want to learn about? Who do you know that you can bring to teach us? Knowledge is knowledge. If you don't have the wisdom and the discernment to know how to use that knowledge, you're screwed. I mean, so who do they know that's going to help us understand where those key priorities are? What's it going to take to build, not how to do it, but what's going to stimulate movement?
Mhm.
So if it's, let's take amphitheater. Literally, we had board members and I never went. They flew to Tuscaloosa. They flew to Bentonville, Arkansas. They flew to God knows where to go look at amphitheaters. They found out, they did their research. Who do we need to talk to? What do we need to know about funding, development, challenges? Then they brought that information and that expertise, that person, back to us virtually in most cases, some in person, to have that discussion. And then they'd sit there and go, well, we need to do this due diligence plan first. Okay, how much do those normally run? The expert says you need to have $100,000 to do this, this, and this. They looked at each other. They said, well, we'll write a check and we'll make it happen. I didn't do anything. I coordinated the meeting. I made sure they had everything they needed to have a good discussion. So that's how they operate. They're not waiting for me to go do that for them, because then it becomes mine. It's not the community's. BHAGs, these big audacious goals, they've got to own it. If we own it, we've lost the game. It'll take 20 years. If they want it to happen, they might flip it in 2 to 7 years.
Yeah, and then do you have, so on that board, is it strictly business owners, CEOs, business owners?
Okay, so that's a great question. So I think I shared this to your group in California. When I first started, I was taught chamber only, chamber only, chamber only. Well, this is a foundation. This is not a policy organization. So I had to change my lens as to who was going to sit on that board. So in an executive chamber board meeting, they talked about who needs to be on that board. Well, we've worked really hard to make sure we only have C-suite on the chamber board. So the chamber board C-suiter said, hey, so-and-so's moved back to town and has retired. She used to be one of the partners at Price Waterhouse and had 30,000 employees under her. We need to get her engaged in this. Oh my gosh, she is amazing. She has global contacts. She picks up the phone and she can make it happen. She hops on a plane. She thinks nothing about what would take me a year to think through, right? Yeah. It's a different type of mindset, and she has the resources. Oh, so-and-so has moved back to town. He used to be the CEO of this international company. He's one of the Texas Rangers owners. We need to ask him to serve on the board. Kelly, I'm only going to give you 2 years. This is what he told me. Well, it's 2023. He's still on the board. 8 years later. So it's because we're not beating them up to meet every month. We let them pick out who they want on the board, who they want to play with, because they move, like I said at the beginning, they move in a circle that is very different than the Kelly circle.
Yeah. And
I want them activating those relationships for Longview.
Yeah.
So we have a blend. We have a CEO of a community-owned bank on our board. We have one of the largest developers on our board. We have a few retired people on our board that are former C-suiters. We have an international company owner on our board. So the next question would be, do they have to be a chamber member? No, because they're bringing dollars and checks It's not about the chamber policy org. It's about the generational movement for Longview through the foundation.
Perfect. And then, so thank you. You shared tons of great information. I kind of want to wrap up, but I want to share with you what my big takeaway was, just in somebody who hasn't gone down this road before. But I do feel like coming back from our conference, that I do have this bigger picture kind of element swirling around my head. But I also want to be very practical and like just getting started with the 501c3 process. So that was one of the reasons why I took on that. Being the organizer of that panel was because I wanted to start one for myself and learn from people who have done it. So tell me if I am on the right track with this one. The main takeaway that I got in terms of starting one is hire experts. So hire a legal person that's an expert, and hire like an accounting person that's an expert. And then that way I will make sure that I'm setting it up in the right way. That was my big takeaway. Do you feel like that's the best approach to get started?
Yes. So when I was in my prior chamber, I did all the paperwork. I got it done. It worked. I have what I call stupid on my forehead. What took a year took 30 days by hiring the right people.
Yeah.
You know, we got to get out of the way of progress.
Yeah. So just like the right people is, can you just like elaborate on that? Who is the right people? So in my mind, it's somebody in the legal realm that deals with nonprofits, and then somebody that does the accounting for nonprofits, and those are the two that you need to get on board.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So I just wanted to say, like, you're doing phenomenal. Like, that's very aspirational. Like, it's exciting when I get to talk to people like you, because it just gives a whole different mindset to, like, there's chambers that are run totally differently, and it's interesting to see the way that people think and the way that they put those together. So I've learned a ton from you at the conference. I learned a ton from you today. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with me.
Well, thanks for asking. I know you'll do great. I see what you're already doing, and I'm so inspired when I see the things you've done in the period of time. And I think if you could just create a personal board of directors that, you know, here's Kelly, here are these people. I want to learn how to do all these different things. I'm going to plug them in, and then you're going to be on fire.
Yeah.
And it's just asking that question. Who do I need to know? If you had 3 people, if you go to 5 people, ask them, who are the top 3 people you would want to emulate that is from here or lives here today? And will you open a door and introduce me? I don't care if they're a chamber member or not. Go meet those people.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. And like one of the challenges I have just on that note is like, let's just say we'll bring in my board, right? And I will ask that question, right? We need to bring in some potential high level folks into this conversation, and it's kind of like there's just like blank stares looking at me, or there's not the recognition of like, oh yeah, I know who that is, you know. So I get very few responses when that question comes up. Any advice there?
Don't do it in a board meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Do it one-on-one.
Yeah.
Who do they look to for aspiration? Who inspires them? What books are they reading? Because then that kind of reveals a little bit about the personality.
Yeah.
And how they seek wisdom to apply the knowledge they've learned.
Yeah. That's excellent advice again. Well, Kelly, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure, and I hope to be seeing more of you in the future.
Me too. Have fun. Thanks.
Thanks. You too. Bye.